Well, greetings and welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm alone today, just me, Braxton, even though this particular stream would be excellent for one Jonathan Pritchett Prime, who you all know and love so much. I hope that as people are streaming in, you'll go ahead and let your comments be known. Super chats will be privileged, but we're going to just jump right into this. And this may not be the longest of live streams. Somebody let me know if my mic is all working well, because I've been told recently that it's been going out. But I'm not going to wait for that. I'm just going to keep trucking, and we're going to assume that everything is going according to plan, because we don't do in-ear monitors here. Thank you, Adam. All right. So with that, there is an atheist channel called The Shaken Fist that is not a very big channel, but they have been doing a response video through my book, Core Facts. Now, they're using the first edition of Core Facts. There was a newer edition that came out a couple of years ago that I'm pushing now, but they're using the older version, and I understand that. There's a lot of reviews on the older version compared to the newer version because it hasn't been out as long. But we're going to jump into this now. Let me just go ahead and say from the start that these two guys, by the way, I linked the whole playlist to the read through of my book. They're doing multiple episodes. They're going through my book, Core Facts. And so I've got that linked in the description. I want you to check out those videos if you have the time, not because I think it'll necessarily be edifying or anything like that. But number one, I want you to watch it to see what the atheist responses are. I want you to see the atheist responses. Now, these guys are very snarky. There's a lot of language. In fact, if you have kids around, you should just go ahead and know that in this particular stream, I'm going to just play their clips. They drop the F-bomb quite a bit. There's a lot of language. I shouldn't say they so much, because there's two guys on the stream, and one of them, who has a real nice radio voice and everything, he strikes me as the one who's kind of a little more cautious about saying such outlandish, bombastic comments and really hateful, disgusting, snarky comments. That said, even to the British guy, I take him to be British, maybe something else, but even the British guy that's on there, who is kind of snarky, I find myself laughing if they say something genuinely funny, even though it's at my expense. In that sense, I like these guys. I mean, I used to feel that way about Pine Creek. You know, Pine Creek does more political stuff now, but it used to be an atheist channel, more obviously so. And if he said something funny about me at my own expense, I thought it was hilarious. If it was genuinely funny, I'd be laughing at myself in the midst of all kinds of horrible things he's saying about me, because I can still find it funny. And in this realm of worldview discussions with atheists and Christians, it's just kind of seldom that there's anything genuinely funny, like somebody creating comedic entertainment. And so I find it funny when it happens. There's a few moments like that with hey, the other day, Godless Engineer, for example, said I look like a naked mole rat. Me and my wife laughed about that, and we still reference it, and she'll refer to me as naked mole rat. We'll joke about that all the time because it was funny, even though in that video he's saying that he no longer considers me a friend or something like that. So these guys do it too. That's totally fine. I think it's funny, but most of what we get in this is just, well, let me just go ahead and tell you the couple of problems I have with this as we start. One of those things is they cut the video so frequently that they don't actually ever get to hear much of what I actually say, even though they're reading it. And one of the reasons for that is it seems very obvious to me that this is an entertainment or comedy channel that the guy is trying to go for. So there's a lot of like Gen X fart joke type humor in there, that it's snarky and it's profane, and they're referencing pop culture that nobody knows about and all these kind of things. Just real, like, obvious, like cringe Gen X type fart joke stuff. And let me tell you something. I wish that Dr. Jonathan Pritchett was with me here, because as we call him around here, Pritchett Prime does that better than anyone. And so to listen to this guy limp along doing it and think about Pritchett if he were on the stream, it's probably why it's a good thing he's not on the stream. He's out of town at the moment. So anyway, that said, I do like these guys in spite of all of that, but that's one reason why I don't think that this is a really good review, because they don't stick with it long enough. They're too interested in making their jokes. And then the second thing is, there is a real desire to, like, who cares what he's saying? Let's peel it back and look for what he's trying to do underneath, because he's definitely a grifter who's looking to do something deceptive underneath the layers. And so we got to forget what he's saying and get to that, which becomes most of what these streams are. All of that said, we're going to take a look at some of this to demonstrate what I'm saying, I think. And I've got receipts. Man. We're going to look at this. and then you'll kind of know whether you think you should spend more time engaging with it or not. But again, the whole playlist is linked down there. So if you think I'm taking something out of context or whatever, feel free to just dive right into that and get going. So we're going to jump in now here, and we're going to see what they say. I've clipped out some moments. This is toward, I think, this is in my introduction where I'm explaining things. And I want you to notice something that I explained very, very clearly. And actually, we're going to find out later, they're kind of shocked that I'm this open about what I'm doing. And so they have to find some other way to make it deceptive or whatever. But anyway, let's hear what they have to say about my methodology of showing first that God exists and then that God raised Jesus from the dead. For those that don't know, my book, Core Facts, the words there are an acrostic. Each letter of the word core stands for a different part of the case for God's existence. Each letter of the word fact stands for a different part of the case for the resurrection. Okay, so you can, it's flexible that way. You can use whichever one you need. If you're already talking to someone who believes in God, then you can just go straight for the facts of the resurrection like that. But I explained that I'm a classical apologist, which is a two-step approach where you first show that God exists, and then after that, you show that God raised Jesus from the dead. Let's see what they make out of that.
Next up, he's just going to go through all the things that are in the book. I am going to skip past that because that's part of the fun. You know, I'll put a link in the description so you can download this PDF if you want to read it on your own. I doubt you're going to want to. Okay, now, real quick, I just have to jump in and say, is he saying that he's got... Now, I didn't see it in any of the links that I looked at, but is he saying that he's putting my entire book out there for free as a PDF? If so, that's obvious copyright infringement. YouTube won't, that's not going to save you that this is a YouTube video. If you're putting my entire book on the screen throughout this thing, or you're making the PDF downloadable, I'm not going to do anything about it. At least I don't see any reason to do anything about it. I'm just glad that it's out there, but bad form, Peter, bad form. I haven't put it in there yet, but you know.
I just gave a Gen X pop culture reference, by the way.
I suppose it's a book club, goddammit. You're all supposed to read along.
Yeah. Download and read along.
If we have to suffer, so do you.
Fair enough.
So
yeah,
this is one of the this is the first time he admits this next bit, and I love this because
he admits it.
Never hear them say it out loud, right? Because we're not supposed to read this book, are we? I know he's talking, the unbelievers have an open mind, but really, he's saying that so he can appear gregarious to everyone, because really, he's preaching to the, he's preaching to his sheep, to his flock, you know what I mean? Because he is the shepherd that is leading them into the light, blah, blah, blah. So, they say different things that they wouldn't say in public.
Okay, now I want you to notice something here. He says that we say different things that we wouldn't say in public. This book is really just for the sheep. Even though I address atheists in the book, it's really just for the sheep. So actually, we're getting some secret insider information. What do these Christians tell each other in their books that they don't say anywhere else? And what it turns out that they say in their books, they don't say anywhere else, is this real insidious thing. They're they're coming right out in the book and saying it, that they first argue for God, and then they argue for the resurrection secondly. Now let's see, is that true that I won't ever say that out loud? I'm admitting it here, but I would never say it in public, like on my very publicly available YouTube channel. Well, let's just find out.
Classical apologetics, which is what I pretty well consider myself to be, a classical apologist.
Natural theology.
Classical apologetics shows, number one, that God exists, usually, then number two, that Jesus is divine, or that Jesus rose from the dead. Usually Jesus rose from the dead. Okay, so it's a two-step method. And I want you to maybe, after I explain these five, pause it and go back and listen again if you're not familiar. Classical approach, number one, God exists. You show arguments for that. Number two, God raised Jesus from the dead.
Okay, so I'm hiding it so well that not only did I put it on my publicly available YouTube channel, but in fact, I told people they should watch it over and over again until they understand. Let's see what else I do that's so deceptive.
Classical apologists will say...
There's more natural theology involved in
well, yeah, because the criticism, if we got very, very...
Pat Pritchett, by the way, and notice that in this one, I explain exactly why it's a two-step method.
Technical, the criticism of just flat evidential apologetics is you could say, well, okay, even if you showed me that Jesus somehow was raised from the dead, why should I believe that God is the best explanation for that or something? And oftentimes, like Mike Licona, people like that will be happy to just say, fine, if you're willing to admit that Jesus rose from the dead, that's enough for me, because everyone in the audience knows the best candidate for that is God, particularly given the religiously informed context
Right.
with which he rose from the dead. But I do think if you really want to shore that up,
Yeah.
then use the two-step approach, which is classical apologetics, in which you demonstrate that there is a God to have raised Jesus from the dead, so that when you come from the resurrection, number one, it's not as big of a claim, frankly. It's still as big of an event, but not as big
After
of a
you've
claim.
demonstrated God exists, if
Raising
God
a man
exists-
from the dead is not,
Right.
it's small potatoes if he created
Right.
the universe from nothing.
Exactly.
I mean, we'll say more about this in just a moment, but I think there's people even in the chat right now who are unaware of the very clear reason we often state for why we do this.
Wait.
In terms of apologetic methodologies, this is what's known as the cumulative case approach. Now, there are various approaches to Christian apologetics. There's classical apologetics, which takes a two-step approach, first showing that God exists, then showing that God raised Jesus from the dead.
Like, how? So what he basically said is there's a two-step thing, right? You got the core and then you got the facts. Core is a bunch of arguments and the facts are about Jesus, right? And it's all acronyms. And he's saying that the first four, the core, are all related to the existence of God. However, this material doesn't specify that the God being argued for is the one true God of Christian scripture. That's an amazing revelation.
Yeah, it's not an amazing revelation for anyone who has, decided to put together a channel to respond to Christian apologists and has read like one of their books or watched some of their videos or anything, because this is something that we're open about, those of us who talk about methodology. In fact, can I tell you, we're going to get in just a moment to more about this, but the fact is, I have a friend here at Trinity College and Seminary who doesn't want me to talk about methodologies because it's boring. I love talking about classical, evidential, cumulative case, presuppositional, and reformed epistemology. I love going into all that stuff. I don't know why. I don't know what weird thing happened to me or when I was dropped as a baby that I love talking about different apologetic methodologies, but I love talking about them. People tell me I shouldn't because it's too tedious, but guess what? Good news for you and for this video, I do talk about it quite a bit, as we've just seen.
Especially when he's going to give you the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, you know what I mean? And he's just there going, yeah, none of these actually argue for our God.
Is that what I'm saying? None of them argue for our God? See, you might be an atheist watching right now and you're thinking, wait a minute, on the one hand, if he's saying they are arguing for his God, well, then they don't make the case and he fails. But if they aren't, well, then it's a waste of time because he's arguing for somebody else's God, right? Or the God of the philosophers. Or is there another explanation that was just explained in clips from me from the past on Trinity Radio?
None of them.
Well,
So
that's the thing. He only thinks that there's one God. And many times Christians don't realize that providing evidence that there's a creator does not get them to anything named God.
Okay, now let's pause here for a moment. Christians just haven't thought about this. Christians don't think about this, or they don't realize this. Do you really think that I've never considered the fact? Do you really think that I need to that I've never considered the fact that there are other religions out there and possibly other gods out there that we could be responding to? This just never crossed our mind before. No. How about there's a third option? It's not, on the one hand, that this is some God that once I argue for him, because the way I'm understanding what he's saying here, it sounds like what he's saying is that I'm trying to trick everyone. Like I'm trying to get them all thinking philosophically. So they're like, oh, this guy's really smart. And then I've dumped Jesus on them. They're like, oh yeah, so he must be right about Jesus. There's a very clear explanation for why we're doing this that I thought I made pretty clear. And that is that we show first that God exists so that we have shown that there is a power capable of doing something like a resurrection, so that when we come to the resurrection case, it's more likely that there's a powerful explanation for why Jesus could have been risen from the dead. We understand that to say that a man naturally raised from the dead is very evidentially flawed. We don't think that makes a lot of sense. We've never seen men naturally raised from the dead. What we're saying is there's a God who's powerful enough to do something like this, to raise a man like Jesus from the dead. And so we come to the discussion about the resurrection already with the understanding that there is a power that's capable of such a thing like this. So this is the whole idea. And in fact, Christian classicalists and evidentialists argue back and forth about whether that step is necessary. Evidentialists, as I said in the video we played, think, well, if you could just show that Jesus was raised from the dead, that's good enough, because then everybody knows it's God. But then you have all the atheists come along and say, no, because a miracle is the least likely thing by definition. And you could have aliens, or you could have, well, what they're talking about that we're going to get back to in just a moment, that maybe there's a programmer in the sky or something. So we're showing first that there is a God to bypass all of that, to explain all of that. So of course we think it's the God of Christian scripture. We're just saying we haven't gotten to that part of the argument yet to clearly explain that. And that comes with the resurrection case. That's why a good classical apologist will always show that there's good reason to believe the resurrection on top of this. That's why my debate with Matt Dillahunty, I argued for the truth of Christianity, not just give the theistic arguments. So I don't know if he thinks that like this is some kind of, there's some sort of a trick that we're trying to play a trick and get them all thinking smart and hear a bunch of philosophical smart stuff. That's how it was presented in the video. And I take serious issue with that. This is just a common apologetic approach. In fact, I'm not trying to keep it a secret. Nobody else is trying to keep it a secret. If we were, we're doing a terrible job, because not only do I mention it, yes, in my book, Core Facts, the old one that you've got and the new one, but on top of that, it's also in Zondervan's Counterpoint series, 5 books on apologetics, where you can watch William Lane Craig and Gary Habermas argue about whether the step that we're so trying to keep secret is discussed. Or you could go to my other book, Evangelistic Apologetics, which is a little bit more academic than Core Facts. And we go into it there and spend a lot of time talking about the different methodologies. And here we go. Here's a book called
you could be like
History of
one Michael Beverly.
Apologetics. I got started playing again. Here's another book, History of Apologetics by Avery Dulles. This isn't even a book about apologetic methodologies. It's a book about the history of apologetics going back to the biblical canon. And yet he takes time to go through the 5 approaches. We could also talk about Norman Geisler's Christian apologetics. No, it's not about you buying all of that stuff. It's just that the point is, when you frame someone as though, oh, they're just trying to trick you and this and that and the other thing. Actually, maybe there's a really good explanation for this that we teach in seminary, that we all talk about, and that lots of people who are involved, atheists and Christians, are aware of. That's all it is. Now, let's see what else they have as a possible explanation.
We were all created by a great programmer in the sky. See.
Okay, perhaps we're all created by a great programmer in the sky. Does that solve the problem? Would that solve the problem of these theistic arguments? No. Well, for example, just take the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument says everything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, so the universe must have a cause. Oh, but wait a second. What if there is a multiverse? Well, you've just kicked the can back a step, because you still can't have a past infinite for reasons discussed all over this channel. Well, what about maybe there's a layer above that, and we're a simulation, as was just discussed. And maybe those people are even a simulation, creating a simulation, and there's a chain of simulations. Okay, but is there a base reality? Because there has to be. And at the base reality, that's where the theistic arguments kick in, and you've accomplished nothing. That works with the cosmological argument. It also works with fine-tuning and design arguments more generally, because the fine-tuning and design arguments obviously require that there's some design in order to have the level of specificity. If you have someone who's capable of creating a simulation with that level of specificity, then they themselves have a level of specificity if they exist in the physical world, as we argue they do, all the way back to base. You have to have a necessary contingent thing that is not designed, also according to the contingency argument. So there's a lot that we could cover here, but no, the programmer answer does not solve this.
So he's saying that, the acronym CORE are all related to the existence of God. However, this material doesn't.
Oh, by the way, cyclical cycle universe doesn't resolve this anyway. Now, I'm not a sciencey guy. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. But my understanding is that the sort of energy that you would have to have in a universe would run out at some point with a cycle. But even without that, the philosophical response to a cyclical universe is perfectly acceptable. You can't have a past infinite series of causal events for reasons that are discussed all over this channel. And I'm happy to defend that claim. And the fact is, on a cyclical model, you would still have that.
Specify that the God being argued for is the one true God of Christian scripture. This is why the evidences represented by the acronym FACTS show that Jesus is the one true God and who has revealed himself in creation.
I mean, I say it right there. I'm like, the way this works is we show that God exists so that we can show then that Jesus being raised from the, so we've got the second part where Jesus is raised from the dead. And that's how you know it's the Christian God.
So,
but it's like I was too like straightforward and clear about what I was saying, and so there's got to be some hidden agenda.
You can kind of see that basically he's gonna lie to you a bunch and use a lot of philosophy.
Lie to you a bunch. I mean, it's amazing because, like, first of all, like in this book, like they claim that at one point the guy claims that when I was in the introduction explaining my testimony or whatever, that I was on the verge of not being a Christian anymore. I don't think I said anything like that. I think what I've always said is that it rattled me, but rattled me in the sense that I wanted to give an answer that I didn't know how to give. But I think this is a desire to paint. Now here I'm going to psychologize them. And I think that's okay because they have psychologized me quite a bit as well. That's what this whole thing basically is. But I think there's a desire to try and let's see, I lost my point because I noticed some of the comments in the chat here. Yeah, I don't know what I was about to say there, but maybe we'll get to it as we move on. Let's keep trucking.
Mumbo jumbo to make you think along the lines he wants you to think, because he's literally priming you. He even says in his explanation of what you're doing, you're literally using the.
Oh yeah, he says it one. I think there's a desire to paint Christians like we all have the Lee Strobel situation where we claim to have been atheists and now we're Christians, and I was never an atheist, ever an atheist.
To prime people. I'd say it's one of the fascinating things about this book. It's very clear in how much.
Yes, exactly right.
He's actually trying to bend your mind as he's talking to you. It's great stuff. It should also be said that I have no desire to replace other evangelistic strategies. Instead, core facts can be used in symphony with existing resources to satisfy the need to defend the truths that they present. The goal is.
Oh, yeah, I skipped ahead to where they're talking about this. Now, notice what I'm saying here. Notice exactly. In fact, maybe I should run it back. They're saying the guys that made this are saying, "Oh, you're annoyed." I enjoy doing this, but am I a little bit passionate when I know that someone is so wrong and it's enjoyable to explain the truth about something that I've said? Yeah, I love that. But annoyed, maybe. I don't know.
It should also be said that I have no desire to replace other evangelistic strategies. Instead, core facts can be used in symphony with existing resources to satisfy the need to defend the truths that they present. The goal is 21st century evangelism. And he's like, hey, I don't want to get into the way of all these other evangelistic ways that people fucking, go out there and spread the word of God. But mine is exactly the same, so it'll fucking fit into it because I'm going to use the same arguments that you do. I've just put them in a nice, tasty acronym, and it makes it feel futuristic. Have you seen how I've said 21st century evangelism? Doesn't it make you feel like you're in a new and progressive way of... And I don't even mean progressive in left wing. I mean progressive as in, like, they've actually made some new arguments and found some new proofs and evidences that they could actually use instead of just the same old bullshit.
Okay. That's not at all what's being discussed here at all. Like, at all. This is talking about other evangelistic strategies, not apologetic strategies, evangelistic tools that people use. I mentioned them earlier in the chapter with the Norman Geisler quote. I say that we need to, that these evangelistic strategies say things like the key question in one of them, the faith soul winning program, is, in your personal opinion, what do you understand it takes for a person to go to heaven? I put all this in the book, in this very chapter, the introduction, and these are just evangelists. They're not apologetics. These are just evangelistic strategies. And I say in this chapter, I don't think they're sufficient because you need some apologetics. So what I'm saying here is you don't need to ditch those old evangelistic stuff. You just need to supplement it with some good apologetics, use the apologetics with it. In fact, I created this very book, Core Facts, to go with one that was known in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I still know some people that use it, called the Faith Soul Winning Program by a guy named Bobby Welch, who used to be the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. He comes from the same church I do. I talked to him about us packaging all this stuff together, the core facts of the faith, because his was called Faith, and Faith was an acronym. And so, I thought it worked out really well, but we're not talking about, you can still use other apologetic strategies. That's not even what's going on here. Just want to make that clear.
However, before moving forward to consider
okay, now we're in the section on the design argument. What I want you to notice here is we're going to talk about evolution here. And this guy seems really, really bothered that, there's got to be some reason why I don't want to include a discussion about the whole creation versus evolution thing. There's got to be. He even says somewhere like it's driving me something like, I'm not quoting him directly, but it's like it's driving me crazy that I can't figure out why he doesn't want to do it, because he's got to have some grifting, deceptive thing underneath instead of exactly what I plainly explain about why I'm doing this. So let's go ahead and hear that.
Formal argument, it is important to say a word about evolutionary biology. Many ardent defenders of the faith expend a great deal of effort in attempts to debunk the claims of evolutionists.
Oh, by the way, there is somebody in the chat saying, well, you blocked me, you shouldn't have blocked me, and all of that. That shows you're a real nice, what does he say exactly? You're a real nice apologist, but you're willing to block me. I hate this guys who pretend to be friendly and then block you. Yeah, I wasn't pretending. I was actually friendly with you, had you on this show. And the last communication I got from you was someone who I used to know posted on your channel something about me that was negative, about I didn't seem to care when he walked away and he was deconverted and all that. So I must be a phony and all these kind of things. I reached out to him to apologize for that. He not only retracted the comment, but made a new comment to you explaining that he was just stressed out. And you wrote an email to me just before all of that saying horrific things about me. So yeah, of course I'm going to block you from my channel. You lambast everyone that you talk to, and in private conversations, you say those sorts of things to me. Of course. All right, let's keep trucking.
I like how even he uses the term evolutionists. Shoop. Sorry, I got distracted by Jester. Because yeah, I can't go into it.
It is true that one will rarely defend a design argument without encountering this subject commonly.
Now, this guy that's speaking right now seems like a fairly nice guy. I mean, he says some, I think, uncool things too, but he's on the show. They're supposed to be doing that. He seems a little more reticent to say some of the more loudmouth, bombastic, provocative, beat my chest, fart joke type things.
If the defender himself does not refer to the subject, the listener will. There are mountains of materials produced by intelligent design advocates and creationists which assist believers in dealing with this very important matter. Nevertheless, discussions regarding evolution can often distract listeners from the elegance of a powerful design argument by bogging the presentation down with the secondary concern which is not necessary for the potency of the argument itself. To be clear, even if evolution were true, it would not refute order in any way. The reason for this is that the argument from design is you have a when do we start now? This nevertheless, so I need to stop.
Yeah, so the thing is, right? Yeah, it does. It doesn't refute order, right? Evolution doesn't refute order. And Mr. Black, I'll try and answer you at some point. But yeah, it doesn't refute order, but the problem is it does actually refute Genesis. So I don't give a flying fuck. Like, just because it doesn't necessarily debunk this one other thing doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to talk about it.
We've got to hold on to evolution. How will atheism continue if we don't have the evolution discussion?
Because it debunks other things, right? So, like here, you said, if we just take evolution off the table, well, then, that's fine. And evolution doesn't necessarily disprove order, but I don't know. Something tells me that actually I'm missing something here. And that
Okay. So the reason that it's mentioned is because the reason I'm not going to go into evolution is, number one, I'm not a scientist. How honest, right? The apologist is admitting something like this. I'm not a scientist, so I don't feel qualified to talk too much about the scientific stuff that I have no background in. Now, I do have a background in understanding philosophical ideas and history and things like that. I can understand and follow those, but I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist. I would think the atheist community would appreciate this. Number two, yes, a good design argument, a good fine-tuning argument can be made without design, because what we're talking about is the fine-tuning for life to be possible. We don't have to get into the evolution discussion. That's an important discussion. I'm blown away by that stuff too. Someone when they were doing their stream put up, well, they were going to say that evolution is an argument for God. Actually, there are arguments for God from evolution that has to do with the time it would take for things to happen and all that sort of thing. But look, there are Christians who are evolutionists, there are Christians who are young earth creationists, and everything in between. And so here's what that means. Ask yourself this question. If evolution is true, does that mean that God doesn't exist, or that Jesus didn't rise from the dead? What's that? Oh, no, it doesn't? Oh, well, then it's not an argument against Christianity. Oh, but it shoots down Genesis 1. This is why oftentimes atheists who make this kind of content are considered to be fundamentalist atheists, because they think, I'm not saying this is necessarily true of these guys, but it sure seems that way, that I was raised understanding a certain brand of Christianity. And so that's the only one that even possibly matters. And it's like, do you realize that there have been different takes on Genesis 1 and what the genre of that is and how best to understand that since way before evolutionary biology? Like that is not why people started gravitating toward other views. It's a very difficult genre of literature. One explanation is the young earth creation, straightforward 6-day creation. And then another take on it is that, say, when the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt, it was the creation story that they were familiar with, except these different things were gods. And so Moses is supplanting the lie with the truth, but keeping the same grid because that's what's most important. Like, is it important to you? Do you think it's like really important that God explain all the details of quantum mechanics and all these kind of things to these ancient peoples? They'd be saying, like, this is what Michael Heiser used to say about this. They'd be saying to me, like, why are you giving me this? I can't possibly grapple with what you're saying. This makes absolutely no sense to me because I'm a person entrenched in history. So yeah, there's different ways of understanding this. The most popular way right now, even among conservative scholars like John Walton, is to say something like this is actually representative of a temple dedication ceremony, and that the creation that's happening there is not creation like what do they call it? They have the different kinds. Somebody can maybe help me. There's material creation. Material and functional creation. There's two different Hebrew words, and what's going on there is functional creation and not material creation. Material creation being the bringing into existence of something, and functional creation being declaring its purpose. So when you're walking along and you pick up a stick in the forest and you make a walking stick of it, you didn't do anything to the stick, but you made a walking stick of it in the sense that you declared its function. That is a very popular, perhaps the most popular current view that's going on right now. This is not something new. This is not something that was done in response to evolution. And it means that demonstrating that evolution is true and then thinking you really dunked on Christians, I mean, that's fundamentalist atheism, man. That's all I have to say.
Actually, evolution is really good for fucking like debunking order. And I'd like if someone could.
Well, now hold on a second. And also, based on what's being said in the chat, there's a big difference in not taking the origin story seriously and taking it so unseriously that you demand the wooden thing that you were raised with has to be the only explanation when historically there are many.
Tell me what that is. It just feels like I'm being dumb and missing something simple, like a little simple connection.
Yeah, see, here he's going on. He's like, there's got to be some reason he doesn't want to talk about, some shifty, insidious reason. He doesn't say that, but that's what he's implying. There's got to be some deceptive reason he's doing this. It's like, seriously? Okay.
It's
like I give the just like I give the explanation for why it's a two-step method, and give the explanation of the evangelistic approaches that I'm not trying to circumvent. Like I still want people to use evangelistic, non-apologetic material and then use the apologetic material. I'm not saying here's new arguments that debunk the old apologetic evangelist. That's not what's being said. Like I'm explaining all these things, and it's like I'm too clear is the criticism that there must be a deception. I'm so clear there must be a deception underneath somewhere.
Why the fuck else would someone like Braxton Hunter intentionally go, hey, by the way, I don't want you to think about this, right? Because to me, someone like that is trying to hide something.
I'm sorry you look smug, and perhaps I come across smug sometimes. I actually think that, and it won't be true of this video perhaps, but I'm thought of as a kind of a friendly non-atheist, like Christian out there. And that's all fine for you to think that I'm smug. That doesn't bother me when I play your video and you're saying these kinds of things. And you're like, what do you think my audience thinks right now as we're listening to this? And you're saying your criticism is you look smug, and they're hearing this. Like this is out in the open. They're hearing this. I know you put it out in the open, but now it's more out in the open. And I want them to hear me and hear you. And if they think my attitude is unacceptable compared to what I'm playing, that's fine, bud.
If they're telling you that they don't want to talk about it, well then, So the reason for this is that the argument from design focuses more than mere biological life. But the problem with that is, I know, we're all but humans. But I'm one of those.
The chat doesn't know either. What is it? We got to work together and figure out the shady underbelly of this.
I'm one of those. I've always underachieved, so I always need to be better.
You know, I'm a little lost. I am already a little lost here on
All right.
this. This is never something that I was brought up believing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't see its connection overall. I just don't see its connection to biblical, the biblical God.
Well, remember, he said in his introduction, the core arguments don't necessarily bring you to his God.
That's true. He did say that. He almost says it right away.
Yeah.
Like around the 10th sentence of this book.
Around the 10th set, like really fast, early on, almost right away, around the 10th sentence, he was so clear. Why was he so clear? Because I want to be clear. I want you to know my real reasons why I say the things that I do. And you can spend all the time you want to racking your brain for what the secret deceptions are underneath. You're not going to find anything. Now, there's a real obvious joke someone can make about the analogy I'm about to say and apply it to God, which would be really like I'm calling it out here because it's kind of silly. But what I'm going to say here is looking for a deception like that in my book is like, where's Waldo? But there's no Waldo in any of the pictures. Now, someone could easily be, oh, where's God? There's no evidence for God. Right. Get your own joke. I'm making this joke. And the fact is, it's like looking for the deception here is like looking for where's Waldo in a book where there is no Waldo. You may find something I got wrong. That's totally possible. You may find something where I mess up and maybe it looks like something to you if you're this primed to look for where I'm trying to be shifty or something, but there's just not anything like that. I'm just telling you why I'm doing what I'm doing. All right. Now here he says he doesn't know what connection this has to, he doesn't know what connection this has to the biblical material. And he's talking about the design argument. But if you'll notice on the screen, maybe I can make that bigger. Let's see. Can I make that bigger? It's got to be a way. Full screen. I hope you can still hear me. But if you can still hear me, right at the top of this, there's a Bible verse, Romans 1:20. And I'm making the connection to what the Bible says. Now notice, I'm not using the Bible to make this point, but I am showing that it's certainly consistent with the Bible, because in Romans 1:20, Paul says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. So I'm making it clear there's the biblical connection. Paul said you can look at the world and it's pretty obvious. In other words, there's plenty of evidence that there's a God. It's clearly seen. It's obvious. What is he talking about? Well, he's probably talking about the thing that's made, since that's what he points to. That's the biblical connection. Although I shouldn't be too hard on the other guy, because Jimmy Tuck's TV was actually, like I say, I mean, it was still kind of uncool, but not like the shaking fist who says, well, I'm not being smug. I'm just angry. Well, I don't want you to be angry. I'd love to listen. I'm a nice guy. I could have friendly conversations with you about all this stuff, but you've chosen this. All right, let's see.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, don't worry. Half of these arguments don't point to.
Oh yeah. By the way, my friend Tim Stratton, or maybe someone else, has put here, they do take it seriously. The idea that Augustine himself didn't take the origin story seriously just because he didn't affirm the young earth creationist view would be ridiculous. That's how far back this goes, at least, is Augustine. Thank you for that. Whoops. Let's keep trucking.
God's my God. But the Jesus ones do. So remember, these ones are supposed to make you think like a deist.
Uh-huh.
So
I mean, kind of. They're supposed to show you that a God exists. Now, that doesn't mean deism is true. That's taking another step further, saying that he doesn't have to do with anything. We don't think you can conclude that on the basis of these arguments, but you can conclude on the basis of the theistic arguments that a personal God exists. And then, as we've been saying, go to the resurrection case, and we can demonstrate that it's the Christian God.
Go, oh, do you know what? Yeah. God does make sense. And then he goes, look at Jesus. And you're supposed to go, oh, Hosanna.
No, you're supposed to take those theistic arguments seriously And if they demonstrate to you that God exists, then when you get to the resurrection case, it's another case all on its own, but it's buffered by the fact that we now have a God to do something like a resurrection. And the resurrection case also gives you reason to believe and also demonstrates that the God we've been talking about raised Jesus from the dead, endorsing his ministry. It's the Christian God.
Let's see. The late philosopher Anthony Flew, who had
Oh, this is great. Let's talk about Anthony Flew. For those of you that don't know, Anthony Flew was an atheist philosopher who wrote, I think, some 80 books. And then later in his life, he came to believe that deism was true. He did come to believe that some God exists out there, but that it's deism or maybe he's agnostic about what type of God it is. And he wrote a book called it's called There Is a God, but the book has There Is No God, and it's scratched out and says There Is a God. And it came out like in the late 2000s. I remember when it came out.
Been an atheist for most of his career, confessed. I now believe that the universe was brought into existence by an infinite intelligence. I believe that this universe intricate laws manifest what scientists have called the mind of God. I believe that life and reproduction originate in the divine source. Why do I believe this? Given that it is that I expounded and defended atheism for more than half a century, the short answer is this. This is the world picture, as I see it, and has emerged from modern science.
And that's the end of that quote.
And
that's why I stopped quoting it.
And that's the end of that quote. Why did you look it up? And
oh no, I know. See, I've covered uninspiring sophistry talk about Anthony Flew before, and
I think he must be talking about the fantastic purveyor of YouTube content, Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy.
Like I said, he's trying to make you a deist. That's why he's not. Look, he's like, these people love to pretend that Anthony fucking Flew turned into a Christian and go, look.
Whoa. Now, I've been called a liar here. I want to know where I indicated that Anthony Flew was a Christian. I encourage anyone to scour my videos, all my written literature, anything. Tell me, where did I say that Anthony Flew is a Christian or imply that at all? See, if you think that I'm coming to the design argument or any other theistic argument thinking this definitely proves the Christian God, right? That the Christian God exists, then you may think that me quoting Flew means I'm quoting a Christian to prove that, but I never say that the design argument gets you specifically to the Christian God. And I'm not using Flew here to talk about that. I'm talking about a guy here who came to believe that the design argument works. And it does. That's what's under discussion. Like in the philosophy of religion, like the other day I heard someone, I think it was Vice Rhino or somebody talking about one of my 10 questions or 5 questions for atheists, those kind of things. And I was presenting, what do you guys who are atheists? These are my questions for atheists this year. What do you atheists think about Cameron Bertuzzi saying, hey, if Philip Goff is right, and the argument, like an argument from evil, just maybe there's a God of limited power or something. Well, Braxton, you don't believe in a God of limited power. You believe in the Omnimax God, right? Yes. Oh, well then why are you asking this question? Well, because I wondered what atheists think about that. That's why. Like, I come from a world where it's not always we're in debate mode. It's like, I'm asking a question. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because that kind of does create an interesting question for atheists. That's why I always love it when people respond to my questions and they're like, I destroyed Braxton Hunter's questions. And it's like, good. They were questions. I wanted you to, I don't know what you mean by destroy, but I was hoping you'd answer them. All right, let's see here.
Like he converted. Anthony Flew was a deist and said unabashedly that he did not see any truth in the Christian faith, and even I think he debated John Lennox over it. And John Lennox claimed victory because he became a deist. Well, because he was a deist, and not. He's like, but I converted him. It's like he's still not a Christian, son. So,
yeah.
Next up.
Whoops. I put myself off the screen here and made that full screen. Sorry about that. Now, so I'm almost done, but I thought it would be good to hear what Flew has to actually say, because I happen to have his book here from when I bought it in the late 2000s, because I was interested, paying attention, and trying to understand clearly what people were saying instead of trying to endlessly psychologize and look under the surface. And in Appendix B of Flew's book, there is a God. Maybe you can see there is a God. He says, up to this point, I have discussed the data that led me to accept the existence of a divine mind. Those who hear these arguments almost inevitably ask what I think about the claims of divine revelation. In both my anti-theological books and various debates, I have taken issue with many of the claims of divine revelation or intervention. Now, here we go. Are you ready? Is everybody ready? My current position, however, is more open to at least certain of these claims. In point of fact, I think that the Christian religion is the one religion that most clearly deserves to be honored and respected, whether or not its claims to be a divine revelation is true. There is nothing like the combination of a charismatic figure like Jesus and a first-class intellectual like St. Paul. Virtually all the argument about the content of the religion was produced by St. Paul, who had a brilliant philosophical mind and could both speak and write in all relevant languages. If you're wanting omnipotence to set up a religion, this is the one to beat. So yes, Anthony Flew did not become a Christian, and I've been pretty open about that. I've never claimed otherwise. And here we were talking about design argument. And guess what? Anthony Flew not only came to believe that some God exists, but it's not as though he just slagged off Christianity like it was ridiculous. No, he said, if you want a first-class intellectual like Paul and a charismatic figure like Jesus, and you want omnipotence in a religion, that's the one to beat. That's the one that should be respected. Yeah. So I never claimed that he said that he was a Christian. I'd love for someone to demonstrate that I did. But yeah. So let's see. He says, like I said, you didn't say that in your book, leading the reader to think he converted to Jesus. I quote a lot of different thinkers in my book that are saying positive things about theistic arguments or about the resurrection case that aren't Christians. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a particular point in the section on design. We're talking about design. And he became very much convinced that there was a designer. That's it. I know that you so badly want to find something shady and grifty or something like that, but you can buy this. It's like you can buy this book, Core Facts, at least the one you got, and I think the new one too, on Kindle for like, I don't know, really cheap. Is it like, it's like the cheapest they would let me put it. So it's like either $3.99 or $1.99. I'm not trying to grift anybody. I'm not trying to deceive anybody. I'm telling you what the truth is. Now you can decide on the basis of what we've seen today, how seriously that they're treating this. I think on the one hand, they're approaching it more with an interest in entertainment and comedy. They're trying to create, or one of them anyway, is trying to create a Gen X style comedy show with a lot of atheist fart jokes and things like that, which is fine. It's great. We have that sometimes when Pritchett is on here from our perspective. That's fine, but they're pausing it so much. They're not letting the thoughts even get out there to genuinely assess them. The criticisms that they're bringing, many of them are not the typical criticisms and fail for obvious reasons, as though these haven't been seriously considered. And the second reason why, what was the second reason why I said, oh, if just listen to it. I don't remember exactly all the points or reasons, but listen to it. I've linked the whole playlist. I want you to check it out. I want you to go listen to it, watch it if you can stomach it, and if you want to watch. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. I'm just saying that because there's a heck of a lot of language and stuff. Okay, not pause. I'm talking about. You pause it. He said, pause it. It's a book. You didn't even something about the bit where I say why you aren't talking about evolution. Okay, well, why do you think I'm not talking about evolution? I'll tell you what, just go ahead and tell me. Why do you think I'm scared to talk about evolution? I'm assuming, I can't remember everything you said is on double speed, but my understanding is you think that it shoots down. I think what you said is it shoots down. It may not shoot down design, but it shoots down some things. Like Genesis 1, you think it shoots down Genesis 1. And I already responded to that. So I'm not sure what you're talking about exactly. Why, if you want to leave your listeners from it, so do I, mate. They can go watch. Okay. Well, I'm asking you and giving you a platform here to just tell me what you think I'm trying to hide here about this, but I'm also happy to let them go watch your videos. So, yeah, the link is there. It's our Trusty Ape. The link is already in the description. It's a link to the whole playlist, so you can check it all out, watch the whole thing. I actually think the more you watch it, frankly, when you see the responses, I think it makes the book stronger. So I'm not saying that as bluster. Like, I really thought, I was like, man, I'm glad that these are the things being said, because anyone who just reads it will know, like, oh no, he explains that pretty clear. All right. So I think we're good. I've enjoyed this. I'm going to continue watching maybe some of these book review responses, and maybe we'll bring Pritchett out at some point. He says Attenborough be praised. Actually, Attenborough, I actually did a documentary, and in Turkey on the 7 churches. You can get that on the website. I would give it away for free, but I don't own the rights to it. It was another company, Reitman Productions, that put it together, but you can buy it there and I can give half of that to them. I would give it to you if I could. You can watch the trailer there for free. And there's another guy with us there, Stephen, who's British, and he sounds and kind of looks like a great David Attenborough. So, yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. Yeah, I listen to smaller channels. Usually I like the atheist content creators because usually it's not quite this way. You know what I mean? So, all right. Yeah. We're plugging you, Shaken Fist. You're doing the Lord's work, whether you know it or not. If he can use a donkey, how's that go? If he can use Balaam's ass, he can use, well, I better not say that. We'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.